So when you're looking at the review package that I posted, okay, it's got, you know, some questions / suggested activities in it, most of which involve you reviewing your notes. Okay? In biology, that's what studying looks like. Okay? Reviewing your notes, rewording things in your own words, finding different ways to explain important concepts, things like that. It's a lot of reading and writing. Okay? We like to call it, in physics, we like to call it read and regurgitate, but it's just because physics is much cooler. Okay? So for biology, it is a lot of memorization. Okay? It is a lot of rewriting, restating, okay? Processing things in your mind as many times as possible in different ways. Okay? It also can look like you anticipating how I might ask a certain type of question. Okay? Which I'll talk a little bit about today when we do the review. Like, here's how I would ask a question like that. But also, the practice test is a good place to look for how I might ask certain types of questions. Okay? Because I'm not very creative. I've already come up with ways to do that. So, okay, looking over that is probably a good idea as well. So what I'll do is same thing I did in chemistry. I'll go over the key concepts. Okay? I'll talk about the test, how long it is, how many questions, all of that. It's the same format as your chemistry exam. All of your exams will be that format. There'll be some multiple choice and some written. Okay? Now, in this test, the written is really, really written. Okay? Like, it's lots of actual writing. Please keep in mind that someone, namely me, has to read what you write. And he must thus be able to read what you write. Okay? I have seen some penmanship that I would hate if your penmanship got in the way of me being able to understand what you're telling me, especially what you're trying to tell me is right. Okay? But if I can't read it, then I have to err on the side of, I guess you didn't know it. Okay?
Is that legible?
Oh, that's perfect.
Okay.
I mean, like, I'm looking at it and I can't tell if it's Sanskrit or English. Okay? Like, and I'm not kidding when I say that. I see penmanship that bad. Okay? Most people come up to me like, Mr. Coderre, is my penmanship okay? I'm like, if you're asking, it's probably fine. Okay? If it isn't, you know it isn't. Please take your time when you're writing on the test so I can read it. It's really, really important. Okay? And I'm not saying that to, you know, to take a stab at you. I want to be able to give you the marks you deserve. That means I have to be able to read what you write. Okay? Everybody with me there? Now, first thing we talked about in this unit, cell theory. Okay? So, part of cell theory would be that it's likely going to be in the multiple choice. Okay? Especially the strictly recall stuff like Hook, Leeuwenhoek, Schleiden, and Schwann. Okay? Those guys are going to be multiple choice questions because they had certain important roles to play in the development of the cell theory. Okay? And those things have been questions on some of your quizzes already this unit. Okay? Now, the second point of the cell theory, which is, what's the second point of the cell theory? Cells carry out the basic functions of the organism. That's something you could probably work into a few of your written response questions, especially ones about cellular transport, since transporting things is kind of a basic function. Okay? That's just showing me that you're able to integrate and connect different concepts from the unit. So the second point of the cell theory is one that we talked about basically all through the unit, okay? Because it relates to even multicellular organisms to an extent. Okay, so knowing that second point's important. Obviously knowing all 3 points is important, but all 3 points would likely be a multiple choice question like, which of the following is not part of the cell theory? Okay, since a multiple choice question typically has 4 items. All right, so that's really all there is with the cell theory. Okay, now, size estimation and microscopy. It is very likely that you could get a question that looks something like this one in the multiple choice. You're looking at this organism under high power, where the field of view is 400 micrometers. The best estimate for the size of this specimen is A, 400 micrometers, B, 150 micrometers, C, 200 micrometers, or D, 300 micrometers. Which one would be the best estimate there?
D.
Yeah, 300. Okay? You'll definitely get something like that. Okay? Because being able to estimate the size of an object is an important skill that we did go over in this unit. Okay? So expect that you'll see that. There could also be the odd question in the multiple choice about microscopy techniques, like what lens do you start on, or why do you start on that lens, okay? Things like that, okay? So, how do you carry a microscope, okay? The things we talked about in class, they're in your notes, okay? Those are definitely game for the multiple choice part of the unit exam, okay? So make sure you review that stuff. Okay, modes of nutrition. So that was lesson 4. Okay, definitely know those. They could be in the multiple choice for sure. And they could also be part of maybe a written response question. So know what they are. Okay, be able to spell them.
Do I have to spell them perfectly or just close enough?
Close enough that I know what you were trying to write. Sometimes it's far enough away that I have to err on the side of I don't know that they knew that. Okay, like nucleus and nucleolus, and writing it as nucleolus. Going, Mr. Codere will be nice. No, he won't.
Well, if there's
Okay.
one out, then
Can I like put an arrow to them and say the one with the O and the one without the O?
No, just spell it right.
it's one thing you gotta look at, Jackson.
Okay, in that one we talked about those, and we talked about its influence on cell structure. Okay, there could be some multiple choice about that. Okay, but it could also be part of a written response answer where you're maybe explaining, specialization or something like that, and you'd be talking about how these cells would have more of a particular organelle because it's from a photoautotroph and so on and so on. Okay. Chemoheterotrophs, we know they have lysosomes because they have to digest food. They have centrioles to help with cell division. They don't have a cell wall because they need to be flexible, right? They have a greater amount of microfibers and cytoskeleton because they're mobile. Whereas plant cells have chloroplasts, have a water vacuole, have a rigid cell wall because they're in one place. They make their own food. Okay, so understand how those modes of nutrition influence the structure of the cells. Okay, so that's what you kind of need to get from that one. That lesson is also where we labeled our cell diagrams. There's definitely a diagram of the cell on the unit exam. Okay, and just like on your quizzes, I will select about 6 structures from that cell, and you will have to give me the name and the function of those structures. Okay, and you're not going to know whether it's a plant cell or an animal cell. Both are in your practice set. Okay. One is in the multiple choice, the other's in the written, in your practice set. But, okay, or one's in the review activities, the other's on the test, something like that. Okay, so make sure you know those things because that leads to point number 4, which is cell structure, labeling. Okay, know that compartmentalization, that word, okay, that could definitely be a multiple choice item. Okay, could also be part of an explanation in a written response item. Okay, and we did use the term eukaryotic a number of times throughout the units. Okay, remember that eukaryotic cells are cells like ours, okay, that have the compartmentalization. Prokaryotic cells do not. Okay, so you do need to know those words, not necessarily that you're going to have to write them, but they're in the written or in the multiple choice part. Okay, not necessarily testing exactly what they are, but if they're in there, you need to know what they are so that you can get to the answer. Okay, cell transport. I would say that if there's one thing on this test that's worth more marks than any other concept, it's that. Okay, what are the big 3? osmosis, diffusion, and active transport. Should you be able to identify, explain, and apply all three of those to a practical situation?
Probably.
Yes, because that's how I'm going to ask it. Okay, I'm going to give you a practical situation, probably with a picture, okay, and I'm going to say which major cell transport process, that means which of the big three, okay, most applies to this situation and why. Here's how you answer a question like that. You first identify which one it is. So if you think it's osmosis, you write in the cell transport process defined here is osmosis. And then you tell me what osmosis is. Osmosis is the passive movement of water across a membrane to balance salt concentrations. And here's how it applies to this. 5 marks. Okay, same could be said for diffusion. Okay, if you thought it was diffusion, then you would say diffusion is present here. Okay, diffusion is the passive transport of all materials through the cytoplasm from high to low. Okay, here's how it applies to this situation. Okay, and with diffusion, we already know that it's kind of slow, and it's not targeted, and it has limitations that have to do with cell size. In fact, we did an activity about that. Is that something that might pop up on the test?
Most likely.
Yeah, I would say so. Okay, and then if it was active transport, okay, this is active transport. It uses energy to pump materials against the gradient or from low to high concentration. Okay, it uses the carrier proteins on the membrane. Okay, in order to do that, all of those little details, okay, they add up pretty quickly to 4 or 5 marks. Okay, but that's how I would ask it. Here's a situation. You have to figure out which one is present. Explain it. Okay, so cell transport, diffusion, okay, osmosis, okay, and active transport. Now, since being able to identify in a situation which one of these transport processes is occurring, would it be useful to have like a key or a trigger that tells you which one it is? Okay, let's start with osmosis.
Water.
It only transports water. That's your trigger, okay? If the question is talking about water or salt, it is probably talking about osmosis, okay? Those are the two things that have to do with osmosis, okay? Water moves in response to salt, hypertonic, hypotonic, right? It's going one way or the other, right? And it's passive, right? The trigger for diffusion is it's the only one that doesn't involve crossing a what? Membrane. Okay, and it can transport anything. And we just said a minute ago that diffusion is often tied to surface area, volume, and cell size. Okay, so that is something else I would watch for if I was trying to figure out which cell transport process was involved. And then for active transport, it's the only one that can do what? Right, it's the only one that can make concentrations essentially greater, okay? It's the only one that's active, that uses energy, okay? So that's its kind of, if it's looking to make a concentration somewhere greater than it normally would be, that's gotta be active transport, because the other ones are always from high to low, okay? If this one's making concentration higher, it's probably active transport, okay? And an important part of active transport is those carrier or transport proteins that are embedded in the membrane that change their shape to enable it to happen. So make sure you mention something about that if you are talking about active transport. Okay, multicellularity, specialization. Okay, in order to be considered truly multicellular, you have to have specialization. What is our example of an organism using specialization? No, in class, what did we talk about?
Oh.
I mean, yes, we are an example, definitely. Sorry, I didn't mean to shut you down there, Alex. That's definitely okay, an example of it, but what one did we go over multiple times in class?
Leaf.
The leaf. Okay, the layers of the leaf. gotta know the layers of the leaf. They are the example of a multicellular organism showing specialization. Okay? Know that the upper epidermis and lower epidermis secrete a waxy cuticle. Okay? That the palisade layer is packed full of densely packed chloroplast-infused cells that carry out photosynthesis. That the spongy layer is full of irregular cells that create gaps and spaces through which the gases can pass, okay, that allow photosynthesis to occur, okay, and that the stomates are made of two guard cells whose shape can change based on how much water is present and osmotic pressure, and that they can limit and control the amount of evaporation that occurs. That's our example, be able to explain that. Okay? I guarantee you, you're going to see that layer of the leaf diagram on the test. Okay? Okay, the other thing with multicellularity, its major advantage was that it allowed organisms to overcome a surface area to volume ratio problem. A single-celled organism can only get to a certain size before diffusion will fail. Okay, because its surface area to volume ratio will get too low. Being multicellular allows you to get big because all of you're made of is lots of little cells with good surface area to volume ratios. Okay, so that was kind of the big advantage of multicellularity. Okay, have I mentioned surface area to volume ratio a bunch of times? Okay, probably something that would be on there. Okay, so examples of specialization, layers of the leaf. Okay, we've said that already. I don't know why I put that on there right after the other one, but okay, make sure you know that. Okay, transport in plants. You need to be able to explain how how stuff is transported, water and sugar, what structures are involved, and what processes or forces they use. It'd be very, very easy for me to give a question like, describe how water and sugar are transported in the plant and what structures and processes are involved. 6 marks. Okay, that'd be an easy, almost lazy question for me to write. Okay. So be able to explain that in detail, and that has to do, of course, with our transport in plants lab, okay, that we finished up yesterday, where we cut the leaf off. Okay, we did that to eliminate the roots, so that we were sure that the only place the force could come from was from the leaf, which then tells us it's definitely osmosis. Okay, polar nature of water, cohesion and adhesion, all that kind of stuff. Okay. And then, yeah, apply your knowledge, okay, to situations that I give on the test. Okay, parts of the plant, know the phloem and xylem. Okay, that kind of leads back into that last one, transport in plants. Okay, and know your roots and stem. Okay, where they are, what they do. Okay, same for xylem, phloem, where they are, what they do. Okay, and then there'll be some questions on plant growth and development. So, multiple choice questions about the hormones, for sure. Okay, and probably tropisms as well, but I would also expect written response questions about tropisms, okay, and growth patterns. And I would say that those questions would definitely involve pictures. Okay, so growth, development, hormones, tropisms, how they adapt to their environment. So when you're looking at the pictures, you need to, it's got to be more than just your first knee-jerk reaction to the picture. Make sure you read the question as well, because it will give you other details. So let's say I show you, and this is going to be a terrible drawing, but okay, I show you a picture of a cliff, and there's a tree that's growing off, like it's obviously been tipped over, okay, and it's growing this way. okay? And it's only got branches on the top. Okay, and then in the question, I say to you something like this, and I say, this tree was tipped over, okay, but has continued to grow outwards, okay? This is due to the fact that the cliff it's growing out of is actually shading close to the cliff. So this tree is growing outwards, okay? Explain to me which tropism is being employed here and how it might work. Okay, so which one do you think? I'd say phototropism. If this was geotropism, would the shape be different? It would bend, it would try to balance, right? Okay, and in the stem of the question, it mentions shade. Okay, that's the importance of reading the stem of the question, because oftentimes I have people that look at a tree tipped over and go geo right away because the tree tipped over. Okay, instead of looking at the fact that it's not turning, it's not curving, it's just growing leaves on the top where the sun would be, okay? And that it is growing outwards to get back into the light, okay? So it's important to read it through. So first off, you'd get a mark for identifying that this is phototropism, okay? And then you would have to explain to me how phototropism works. Now, even if you misidentified it, could you still get marks for how tropisms work, for explaining that?
Yep.
Yes, because all tropisms work the same way. So you'd lose the mark for phototropism. You'd lose the mark for saying it's a growth response to the location of light sources, because that's wrong, okay? You would get that mark, okay, if you wrote that it was phototropism, okay? And then you would have to say to me that tropisms are caused by differential rate of growth on either side of the plant. Okay, one side grows faster than the other, okay? That's caused by making more auxins on one side. In this case, it's causing more growth of leaves on the top, not necessarily of a bending, okay? But the branches that are on the top are growing towards the sun, okay? And that can lead to a change in the shape or appearance of the plant, okay? Everybody follow me there? All right, so it's a 5-mark question. Okay, you're going to have to identify in a picture what type of tropism is going on. Okay, how do tropisms work? So those 3 marks, how do tropisms work, are up for grabs whether you get the tropism right or not, because luckily all 3 tropisms have the same mechanics. It's differential rate of growth. It's auxins to the side that needs to grow faster, bending towards the stimulus. Okay. Okay, and factors affecting plant growth. Okay, expect probably some multiple choice questions. Maybe you can work that into a few written response questions as well. Okay. Yeah, so definitely know your factors, okay, so light, temperature, water, okay, periodic disturbances, all those things we went over. Again, more for multiple choice than anything else. And then surface area to volume, okay, diffusion, okay, why, okay, so talk about how when you have a high surface area to volume ratio, that's a good thing, cells generally smaller, diffusion works well over short distances, okay, because things tend to spread out a lot. Right, make sure you can explain that in terms of what we looked at in that cube lab, or cube activity that we did. Okay, why can't cells get big? Okay, that's essentially what we went over. All right, now, talk about the number of questions here in just a sec. Here's the thing for this test, especially in the written response. 3 words: level of detail. Okay? If a question is out of 5 marks, write 5 marks worth of stuff. Okay? It's shocking to me how, even when I say that, okay, level of detail is important. Make sure you write 5 marks worth of stuff. And I give you a tropism question like I showed you there, and somebody goes, phototropism grows towards the light. How many marks are you going to get for that answer? 2. That's 2 of the 5 marks available in that question, because the question would have said, explain how this process occurs. That's level of detail. Okay? So 2 marks would be, it's phototropism, it's growth towards the sun. Okay? Sometimes I'll get one side grows faster than the other. Okay, well that's 3 marks. Okay? Are you still missing some detail? You're missing things about auxins, you're missing things about, cell lengthening. Those are little details. All the little details are important. Okay? The other thing to watch out for is watch out for contradicting yourself in an answer. Okay? Especially another example on the tropism question. Okay? Somebody will do all this stuff about phototropism, they'll have everything right, and then their last sentence will be, but it could also be growing because of gravity. Now what do I do as a marker? I give you 3 marks. Because you correctly told me how tropisms work, but you could not tell me which tropism it was. Make sure you know, guys, I will be picking one where it is obviously one type, one tropism, okay? It cannot be more than one. So if you write all this stuff about phototropism and then go, but it could also be geo, you just said, Codere, I have no idea which one it is, so I'm putting all of them down in the hopes that I'll get it right. No, okay, you have to pick one. And you have to tell me about it. That sort of makes sense? Because I have that happen a lot. Okay, you gotta pick one and go with it. Okay, so level of detail, really important. If it's worth 5 marks, write 5 marks worth of stuff. Okay, and that's something you can look over when you're checking over your tests. Okay, would I get a mark for? I get a mark for that, I get a mark for that. Okay, you have a pretty good idea what I would give marks for, especially after today where I've kind of outlined that, okay, on the questions I would ask. Okay. All right, so the test itself. Okay, 26 multiple choice questions. Okay, and as we said, in the multiple choice, there's things about microscopy, there's things about modes of nutrition, cell transport, functions of parts of the cell, quite a bit about that. Plant structure and behavior and growth, cell transport, compartmentalization, cell theory, cell structure, plant structure, plant transport, plant growth and development, modes of nutrition, multicellularity, plant structure, microscopy. Okay, so same things I told you already, that's what's in there. Okay, for the written response, there are 8 written response questions.
With how many marks?
49 marks in the written. Okay, so things you need to be able to do for the written, okay, we've kind of already talked about here, but make sure you can explain like how plants regulate their water loss. Okay, regulate, not prevent. Okay, there's structures we talked about that regulate versus prevent. Okay, and then your plant growth and development question, and then your cell structure, cell labeling. Okay, so the cell labeling question is 15 marks of the 49. Okay, so that one question is like a third of the marks in the written response. And it's 6 structures from a cell, name, function, just like your quizzes. I'm expecting no greater level of detail than you would have given on the quiz. So you can say, lysosome, digests food. Okay, chloroplast, carries out photosynthesis. Okay, I'm not looking for any more detail than that. Multicellularity, leaf. Leaf. Sure you know the leaf. Plant transport, cell transport, cell transport, cell transport. Hey, that's weird. There's 3 questions on cell transport. Maybe there's 1 for each type. Perhaps. Probably, definitely. All right, so make sure, guys, you look at the point values. They're always going to be in brackets at the end of the written response questions. They tell you how much I'm expecting or how many points you should have. Okay, so if I'm asking you about, plant transport, I'd probably be looking like xylem, water up, osmosis and polar nature of water. Okay, phloem, sugar down, gravity, that'd be 6 marks. Okay, those are little, don't write it like that. A little more detail, but okay, make sure you've got 6 points worth of stuff. Okay? All right. Questions from you guys? Anything you'd like me to review in greater detail?
It would be the same as the chemistry test where the last question is a real world example kind of thing?
No, I've kind of spread that out over many questions on this one. I think this is because biology is a bit different. There's much more of that application in biology than there is in chemistry. So that question was an anomaly in chemistry, but it's the norm in biology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to come in early like we did?
Absolutely, yes. You can start the exam 10 after 8. Okay, so you guys can come in at 10 after 8, and period 2 can write into lunch. So, yeah, so you can get that extra 20 minutes or 25 minutes or so, okay, if you need it. Okay. All right, any other questions, guys? Okay. Well, if more come up, just ask. I'll give you the rest of class to look at that review package that I put on Google Classroom yesterday. Okay. Okay, so it's called old exam questions, but the whole thing isn't old exam questions. Don't know which one's the key here. That one is the key. Okay. Okay, so it's talking about the major concepts and minor concepts, which is kind of what we just did. Okay, and then there's some example questions here for you to work on. Okay, that basically involve you having to go through your notes and look some things up and make a few new notes here or there. Okay, and then after that is the practice test, and you can see I've got different. Right, I had a plant cell up there. There's an animal cell there. Okay, whoop. There's a plant cell in that one. Okay, there's pictures here. Okay, different situations, applications, things like that. So, and then there's obviously the other file is the key. Okay, so you can check them as you go. I don't think I have necessarily keys for all of this stuff. Okay, but this is stuff that you're looking up basically directly out of your notes anyway. All right. So my suggestion would be start looking through the first part of that, because the practice test is something you should do after you've done the bulk of your prep, okay, so that you know the test can tell you what you need to work on still. Okay? Because if you do it now, it's going to tell you you need to work on everything. Okay? So work on everything and then do the pre-test, and then it'll tell you you're ready, and you can feel confident coming into Monday. All right. Okay, you got the rest of class there, guys, which is almost half an hour. So.
What's the next thing?
The next unit is physics. Yes, you can.
Look how tight my notes are. Turn on caps lock.